like it's been a while.
I forgot how to do this entirely. I don't know what is science. Yes, thank you guys for joining us. This is, of course, trèSci Weekly. This is our weekly science show where we give you our thoughts and opinions on all of the trending science news topics of the week. My name is Jonathan Ullman. To my right, I've got Tom Master Chiefs Kaya.
What's up?
How are you?
Doing good.
Good. We'll start the show with the ceremonious handshake.
That's how the Olympics are going to be started in the future.
With a handshake?
No, I'm joking.
Oh. Usually they do like the big
torch running.
Yeah. Oh, the torch. I was just gonna say like the big
ceremony?
show, the ceremony. Yeah. The stomp was at the London Olympics. Me and Kyle saw stomp. We've been tapping on things all the time now.
Making music.
Yeah, making music.
Yeah, it feels good to be back.
Yeah.
We missed the last 2 weeks from New Year's Eve and Christmas.
Exactly.
So we did the holiday thing.
Little holiday break. Had to push the little reset button there.
But yeah, it feels good to be back.
Feels very good to be back.
Yeah, I was reading some science news articles, random things, and I was like, who am I going to tell? Who am I going to tell?
Who am I going to talk to about this?
Should I just tell myself?
just point your phone at yourself and
all right, Tom, this is trèSci. But yeah, it feels good to be back. Followed a lot of stories while we weren't here. Not going to talk about too many of those, but
yeah, we're going to keep it pretty much within this
recent
first week back. Those are going to be the news articles that we go through, but we might, grab an anecdote or two, if you will,
from a couple weeks.
Yeah, definitely.
So I heard we have a Facebook and a YouTube.
We have a Facebook. We have a Facebook. We have a Twitter. We have an Instagram. All of those sites you should go check us out on. It's basically that respective social media.com/trèSci Weekly. Go follow us there for more coverage, for more interesting factoids. More...
I don't spam you all day. It's just good stuff. It's good stuff.
We're on Patreon. I want to give a huge shout out to all our Patreon supporters over the past year.
We got a fresh month starting in the new year.
Yep. You guys know who you are. Thank you so much for your constant support of this. And of course, we're on YouTube. If you like what you see here, go to YouTube and subscribe to us so that you get the alerts for when we go live and when we post new videos. And of course, thumb up the video if you like it. Thumb it down if you didn't. And give us some feedback. Chat with us.
What are you looking to know about?
What do you want to know? Yeah, seriously. Chat with us in the live chat that we have going if you're watching the live version of this, and leave a comment below if you're watching the on-demand version of this.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Definitely leave some comments if you're watching it after the fact.
We'll get back to you, we promise. All right, Tom. Let's begin the show with the list.
Let's do it.
So, do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
All right, I'll start off reading the first one.
Okay.
So, coming to us from the World Health Organization, known as WHO. They recently defined a new disorder they just call it gaming disorder.
Gaming disorder?
Yes.
Okay. So what is gaming disorder, Tom?
Well, would you mind reading that for us?
I will read it for you. So according to the World Health Organization, gaming disorder is defined as, quote,
when you haven't seen outside in 4 months.
As a pattern of gaming behavior characterized by impaired control over gaming, increased priority given to gaming over other activities to the extent that gaming takes precedence over other interests and daily activities, and continuation or escalation of gaming despite the occurrence of negative consequences. End
so
quote.
If there's an earthquake going on, you just keep gaming.
Yeah, or if your mom yells at you and you're just like, sorry, Ma, I gotta play more PUBG.
Yeah,
I don't know.
We gotta kill the boss. Gotta get the drops.
Yeah. So this is obviously something that is not new, I guess. Like
the idea of being addicted to gaming.
Yeah. People have been gaming pretty hard for quite some time.
Yeah, I feel like I could talk about this for a long time.
Yeah,
I have a lot of thoughts on this,
but there's a certain there's like a certain authority when something like the World Health Organization comes in and defines it and classifies it and says, no, this is a thing.
Because then when you go to your doctor, you can say, we can discuss gaming disorder.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. What do you think your doctor would say if you showed up and you're like, Doc,
I got that game.
I think I got the game.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a little while to go into the mainstream medical field, right? Probably a little while.
Definitely.
But, I mean, I'm sure there's tons of healthcare professionals out there right now. Maybe some counselors and people who deal with people who game a lot. I would imagine.
Yeah.
So, at some sort. Because so many people play games, right?
Yeah, I think that probably not so many people, look to clinicians for on their own accord for help on this sort of thing, but maybe
a family member steps in. Or something.
Yeah. Maybe a parent comes in and tells the doctor that their kid won't get away from the video games. I don't know, but I feel like there's sort of this discontinuity between what is an actual disorder and what is just like maybe binging on something. And I'm definitely guilty of having spent a long portion of time binge gaming on certain games when I'm like just heavily into them, but I wouldn't consider myself of like, I don't think I have a problem with that. So I don't know. What about you, Tom? Have you gone on stretches of like just gaming for a really long time, or like?
Yeah, I've definitely been to the point where with certain games I've played them to the point where they would probably consider it in the addiction category, depending on games throughout my life growing up. But they were always still just a game, right? Like, I never like gave up real life goals, I guess, while gaming. But I could see how, when life gets tough, that's what you fall back on completely.
Yeah. So there's something interesting too, I guess, that's a facet of this now, is that like some people stream video games much as we stream, science news coverage.
So some people stream games all the time, and that's how they make their livelihood. And they just play them all day.
Yeah. But I guess that wouldn't fall into this classification.
It wouldn't, because that's their livelihood.
Right. They're not ignoring their responsibility then. It actually is their responsibility to a certain degree to play video games.
Yeah, I think that kind of makes a good point in general, that video games are becoming such a regular part of our society where people are doing it almost as a job, whether it's writing about video games, making them, designing them, reviewing them, playing them on a stream.
Yeah.
It's just a huge part of our culture now. So I do think it's a good thing that the World Health Organization is sort of just getting the wording, the verbiage. The verbiage out there in case it does become a big problem. Because like we were saying, a lot of kids when they're 2 or 3 years old now get an iPad. And what happens when they spend their whole childhood life on some sort of screen? And this might be something we need to monitor more. But at the same time, when you can see it could be a problem and something that could become extremely addictive, at the same time, I also see gaming like any other sort of vice in life, whether it's drinking, gambling, sports, any of those other things. And I think they recognize that. They say that you're not at any more risk becoming addicted to video games as you are to becoming addicted to gambling or anything else.
Right.
I think they're just trying to give it a spot that it never really had in the literature for getting some sort of help when you need it, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's important. They're
not saying that they're just addictive, period, and that and a lot of people get addicted to that.
Right. It's not necessarily the game itself that is, the addictive,
but
nature.
It's an immersive world that might be a little bit better than what's going on.
Yeah.
In your daily life, right?
That's true. There has been some pushback. The Entertainment Software Association, which is a trade group, issued a statement in response to the World Health Organization definition, and they said, quote, "Just like avid sports fans and consumers of all forms of engaging entertainment, gamers are passionate and dedicated with their time. Having captivated gamers for more than 4 decades, more than 2 billion people around the world enjoy video games. The World Health Organization knows that common sense and objective research prove video games are not addictive, and putting that official label on them recklessly trivializes real mental health issues like depression and social anxiety disorder, which deserve treatment and the full attention of the medical community. We strongly encourage the World Health Organization to reverse direction on its proposed action." End quote. So I feel like this is coming from the point of view of somebody who's, invested in the business of video games and looking at this as a
something that might hinder business, right?
Yeah, or something that might hit mainstream media as like, is your child addicted to video games? And, that could be harmful to selling video games, which I think, the ESA has a stake in the matter. But I agree with you. I think it's important to get the pen on paper and to get the verbiage out there just so that we can start to talk about it.
Because even if 95% of people who play games have no problem and they actually find enjoyment and it is actually beneficial to their lives, there is still always that small portion of the population that you don't really want to recognize that I think do take it a little bit too far with regards to gaming at various points of their lives.
Yeah. Coming from the chat, Morocco Nightfang says, I feel like so many people try to push things on the gaming industry and try to place a lot of blame on it, yet you see the same symptoms.
Tried to do that many times.
Yep. And he follows up with, yet you've seen the same symptoms with people with sports, Instagram, Facebook, and social media in general. I would agree with that. I think that, gaming is not by itself like an evil thing.
No, and it can do a lot of good, right? When you have a lot of things going on in your life that you're dealing with, it's nice to step back and be able to play a game instead of having to lash out and get violent at somebody, right? I think gaming does become a lot of a comfort thing to a lot of people.
Yeah, certainly. All right, moving on.
Yeah, we could talk about that one forever.
I know.
I feel very strongly about gaming, very passionate, and it's something that I'm going to do for probably the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But I do recognize where some of the pitfalls could come in.
Definitely. Yeah.
But so much good has come from them in my life.
Me too, man. Straight up. Moving on, number 2, Falcon Heavy is set to launch sometime in January. This comes by way from Elon Musk's Instagram page here. And there's a little video that we can kind of loop and play for you. He goes on to say, if I can scroll over to it, Falcon Heavy now vertical on the former Apollo 11 moon rocket launch pad. At 2,500 tons of thrust, equal to 18 Boeing 747 aircraft at full throttle, it will be the most powerful rocket in the world by a factor of 2. Excitement on launch day guaranteed one way or the other. Hold down test fire next week. Launch end of the month. Tom?
So, Falcon Heavy. What is Falcon Heavy? Is this the biggest rocket?
So, this is going to be, basically the biggest rocket in terms of, like,
thrust
power, size, that we're really, testing out here. And
so Elon Musk at the end says it's going to be exciting one way or another. And I think he's referencing that to whether it's a sick launch and it works and it's crazy powerful, or it's a massive explosion because it's a massive launch that's being undertaken.
Yeah.
So this one is definitely to be watched.
Definitely. I mean, we'll definitely be following along,
but it's impressive, right? This massive rocket. And then we were even kind of skeptical. We're like, are they trying to land this?
Right, yeah. We weren't sure if this was going to be a payload that, just kind of falls back to Earth and crashes like somewhere in the desert or, in the ocean or whatever. Or are they really going to try to land, the propulsion system back onto the launch pad? And it
turns out they are.
They are, yeah. Which is interesting. So the Falcon Heavy really kind of consists of 3 separate Falcon 9 rockets just kind of strapped together. So I assume that they'll probably kind of come apart and then maybe come back to landing each individually.
I believe the first 2 are sort of for the initial launch and thrust, and then those will come off as well. But like the point you made, it kind of looks like 3 Falcon 9 rockets together. And Elon Musk put out a statement saying that even though that's what it looks like, the logistical thing of actually launching that rocket is a lot more than just putting the 3 together and launching them.
Oh, sure.
It becomes a massive like physics undergoing to see how all the thrusts work together and everything.
Yeah. Well, this was actually supposed to launch sometime last year, and I guess that's what kind of set along some of the delays, is that it wasn't as simple as they originally thought. This is interesting because it made a lot of headlines with Musk saying that he was going to put his Tesla Roadster in the payload, and supposedly that's
orbit around the sun. Right?
Yeah, supposedly that's still happening.
We'll see.
Yeah, I mean,
he's a funny guy. It might happen.
Yeah. Speaking of funny things that Elon Musk says, back on December 22nd, some of you guys might have saw the headlines that there was something crazy in the California night sky.
A lot of people on social media went right to aliens.
Yep. Elon Musk himself actually tweeted out nuclear alien UFO from North Korea.
A satire post of all the other stuff people were posting. Yeah, some people said it's a missile from North Korea.
Yeah.
Some people said it's aliens.
Yeah.
But it turns out that launch, when they launched it, it was just after sunset. So it looked dark, but then the sun rays still got to hit the rocket.
Yeah.
So it looked all like bright and weird and bizarre, but it just happened to be the exact time that it was.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
It looked crazy in the sky.
Mm-hmm. And the plume, right, was actually just from a Falcon 9 rocket that was actually delivering 10 Iridium NEXT satellites.
Communication
satellites, which it did successfully. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, but I can imagine, driving along on the...
If you have no idea and you just look up.
On the highway and just be like, what is that? That's crazy. So, yeah.
Yeah, this next one should hopefully provide as much lulls on the social media.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's a good one.
Definitely. Well, we'll be covering it one way or the other.
And then the last point I wanted to make was that as SpaceX is building up their rockets, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, we did a few episodes where we talked about they're eventually trying to have the BFR ship that's going to be used for going to Mars and the moon and who knows what. So they're sort of just getting bigger and bigger and getting ready to have that as a reality. So we'll see how this test goes.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. Moving on. Next one.
Number 3.
Number trace. We got the new largest prime number.
Move over 181.
So this prime number. So yeah, when you're trying to find a new prime number, we found out it's kind of interesting that they'll actually multiply 2 by itself countless times and then subtract 1 from it, and then they are looking for a new prime number this way. It's sort of an easier way than trying to just calculate it as it goes out. It's kind of like a trick to find massively large prime numbers.
Yeah.
So that's what they did, and this prime number is 23,249,425 digits. So that's all those numbers in a row. So it's 23 million numbers in a row is how long this prime number is.
Yeah. So like 150 is a number with 3 digits.
This one has 23 million digits.
Right. We can't even say it because
it's just massive.
There's just no number. There's just no verbiage to say what this number actually looks like. This is just so long. And just real quick before we move on, Tom, what is a prime number?
Oh, yeah. Prime number. We probably should have explained
just
that.
Just define.
Yeah. So a prime number is a number that's only divisible by itself and 1. So for example, 2, you can only divide 2 by 2 and 1.
Okay.
And then you go up 7, you can only divide 7 by 7 and 1.
Yeah.
And then as you go up, they become more and more spread out because as you become a bigger number, there's just more chances for component numbers to make you up.
Right. So so like the number 9, for example, is not a prime number because it's divisible by 9 and 1, but and also 3. By 3.
Exactly.
So, so prime numbers are kind of interesting because they sort of exist as just a true thing across space-time, right? Like
a number is a number, yeah.
Yeah, like if hypothetically speaking, if we were going to make contact with some kind of alien, knowledge out there.
Yeah, speaking of contact, they talk about this in the
movie. In the book and in the movie. They should theoretically understand
the concept of primeness, they say. Yeah.
Right, the concept of prime numbers, because if you have some quantity of something that is, if you have 3 objects, you can't divide it by anything that is not 3 or 1, right? So
yeah, it's more of like a mathematical construct of something you'd understand.
Right. So there's a new biggest prime number in town. Yep. It was discovered by a gentleman named Jonathan Pace, who's an electrical engineer in Germantown, Tennessee. And he found the number using software provided by the Great Internet Mersenne Prime Search.
Yeah, they have funding to specifically lurch for prime numbers.
So why
look?
Yeah. So why would they want to do this?
Yeah. So I didn't really know myself, so we wanted to look up like what might be cool or an application of a large prime number. I had no idea.
Yeah.
It's probably useless, but it turns out it's not actually useless, and they use it in encryption in networks and computers and things. So I think the way I understand it is that when you have a massively large prime number, it's impossible to really go back and like figure out which numbers were like multiplied together to get that prime number. So it's sort of too difficult of a computing task to find out what made this massively large prime number, where you can use it in encryption and coding, where you say that it's this massively large prime number made up of these components, but you can't brute force it back to find out what those components were because the number's so big.
Right.
It becomes too hard of a thing to encrypt because it is such a complicated thing.
So, right. So what you're saying is a computer that has a large prime number to try to factorize and get, what made up that large number is going to have to spend a lot of computing power to do so.
And it turns out with these biggest prime numbers, not even a supercomputer is going to do it.
Okay. So
it's a real way to do some real-time encryption with these massively large numbers.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is going to be an endeavor that people continue to undertake with the promise of quantum computing in the future?
So this sort of encryption seems to be a thing of the past, even though it works well and is pretty cool. It seems like we're moving on towards just better ways of keeping things safe and secure using some sort of quantum techniques that I don't know too much about. But I didn't really know a lot about encryption with these massively large prime numbers, so they're pretty interesting in their own right.
Yeah.
But I think this sort of encryption is not going to be the way of the future.
Yeah, probably not.
Pretty cool though.
Moving on, number 4. Science Magazine tweeted out, when you're feeling sick, your face shows it. Here's how. And then they show this kind of image of two people that look identically the same, to me at least. But I guess the idea is that there was a study done where they tried to really, explicitly say what are the features that you pick up on visually in the face that
what are your facial symptoms when you have some sort of illness
that can indicate a person who is sick
just by looking at them.
So I've actually been feeling a little bit under the weather, so I don't know, Tom, what can you tell me about my face?
Can't tell.
It's beautiful, right? You just can't tell. No, but I guess the way they did this was they had 16 Caucasian volunteers that were, from what they say, injected with a placebo or a piece of bacteria that made them feel sick and caused their immune systems to respond as if they had an infection. I mean, to me, that just means you're sick, right? Like, it's just a lot of words for basically saying they made people sick. Then they showed photos of these people to 62 others who basically rated them either sick or healthy within 5 seconds. Mm-hmm. And 81% of the time, they were able to correctly identify people who were sick. So in a follow-up study, they basically, boiled it down to what were the features that led you to figure that out. And pale skin and hanging eyelids were the best predictors
of someone being sick.
So it's not like the most groundbreaking study, I guess.
I think most of the time you can tell. Or I feel like there's always one person who's like, when you're sick, is like, you look like garbage. Like somebody says that.
It's just totally blunt. And
you don't look very good. Like, you can tell when you're really sick, people can tell just by looking at you.
Yeah.
I don't think it's super groundbreaking or anything. I think we all had an intuition that we can kind of tell when someone's sick.
Yeah. The problem for me
you can't always tell, but
I probably always look sick to everybody then because I just naturally have very pale skin and I'm pretty tired a lot of the time, so I probably have hanging eyelids. So I am sick. Make me well.
And then this happened to just remind me of, as an aside, in the movie World War Z, when everyone was getting taken over, becoming a zombie, it would pass by the people who were terminally sick. like the people with cancer and stuff,
Right,
because
right.
it could tell that they were sick, and then it moved away from them. It doesn't really have anything to do with the study, but
that was a cool movie
reminded
though.
Me. Yeah.
And looping back to the first story, they are making a new World War Z based video game. Actually, I saw that. Yeah, but
you get chased by zombies, right?
Yeah, that happens. That happens in a lot of video games, though.
All right. Nancy says, so interesting. Lots of time you can tell. Although, John, you look great.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
So moving on, next story. The oldest wild bird lays an egg. The oldest one.
The oldest one. How old is this bird,
This
Tom?
bird is 67 years old.
What?
And it's the oldest known wild bird to lay an egg. And it laid its egg at the Midway Atoll, which is basically kind of a part of Hawaii. Not really.
Okay.
Like, not like legally a part of the state of Hawaii, but it's part of that like island chain.
So
geographically, right? Geopolitically.
Yeah, geologically it's part of Hawaii, but not geographically, maybe, is what I'm trying to say.
Like that.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, out there in the middle of the ocean, this bird, 67 years old, laid an egg. And she was with her same mate, which is Akia Kamai. I think that's how you say it.
Is that his name?
That's the bird's name. That's the spouse.
That's the spouse? What
Yeah.
is it? What is the bird's name that we're talking about?
The bird's name is Wisdom.
Oh, really?
That's all, yeah, just Wisdom.
Wisdom. I like that. It sounds like a Martian rover.
Yeah, just Wisdom.
Spirit and opportunity and curiosity and wisdom. Can you imagine the 3 rovers on Mars and then there's just this bird flying around just totally by itself? That'd be crazy.
Yeah, so a pretty remarkable bird. It is estimated to have logged 2 or 3 million miles since it's been flying around since 1956.
Jesus.
So to put that in perspective, that's about 4 or 5 round trips to the moon. So this bird has been flying around.
This bird has seen some stuff, huh?
Oh, yeah.
67 years old, though. That's pretty nuts because...
And, yeah, we know it's 67 years old because they tagged it in 1956. They put a tag on it.
Oh, wow.
And it took until 2002 until they saw it again from 1956. Same bird with the same tag.
I would have figured they just radioactively carbon dated it.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, you
just
could
see
at
how
this
old
point,
it is.
right?
Yeah.
So what's crazy though is that this bird is 67 years old and still reproducing. I mean, humans don't really reproduce at 67 years old.
Yeah.
All that often.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm sure it's happened maybe once or twice, but yeah, I mean that's pretty nuts. I guess because being a bird, all you have to really do is just lay an egg, you know.
And you sort of, I think they do that for pretty much their whole lifespan, right? Most of the time.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not a bird expert.
I guess so. I would imagine there's less complications that can maybe go wrong with it, but that's still pretty impressive that this bird's still kicking around. How old do you think this bird's gonna get, Tom?
I don't know, because when you think about it, if this bird is 67, then how old are the other birds? Like, is it like that anomalous? Are there a whole bunch of other old albatross birds?
Maybe.
Right?
I don't know. I mean, depends on how many they tagged, I guess, back in the day. We'll find out.
Yeah, but definitely threw everyone for a loop. Nobody came even close to thinking that an albatross bird could live to 67. And part of it is because of how long their migrations are.
Oh, okay.
So having to do that takes quite a toll on your body, and then doing that 67 years in a row.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
So kudos to that bird. May we all live as long as as Wisdom the albatross.
It's sad though. The article went on to say that this bird probably outlived many of its mates.
Yeah.
And, just keep going.
Yeah. Are they what's the term I'm looking for?
Monogamous?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like ducks?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But when you have no more partner, you got to find a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to get
sleeping around, you dirty bird, you. All right. Moving on. Number 6. This comes from NASA. They say, food for thought, a new study has shown that lightening up the color of soybean leaves may increase their growth and yields, which may be a key step in boosting the world's food supply. Tom. So typically when you think NASA, you think space, you think astronauts, you think planets,
but they're
telescopes.
Studying some food.
No, not, they study everything. That's the thing with NASA. So they're studying soybeans.
Yeah, and when they say that lightening up of the color, that just means the tint of green.
Right.
Yeah.
So we know that plants are they contain chlorophyll,
which was what makes them green and allows them to absorb the sunlight.
Right.
To convert into energy via photosynthesis.
Very nice. A lot of good science terms there. So this was a research project led by Donald Ort of the University of Illinois and a research scientist, Berkeley Walker. Sorry, I wanted to say Walter. It's Walker of the University of Dusseldorf in Germany. So what they did was they reduced the amount of chlorophyll by 20% in some of these soybean leaves.
And that's what makes them the lighter color.
Yep. And that in turn allowed the plants to conserve 9% of their use of nitrogen, which is a major component of the chlorophyll. And that can then... It did not, however, reduce the plant canopy's photosynthesis rate. So they were able to dial back basically the amount
of chlorophyll and keep the amount of food it's basically producing.
Right. So that's pretty exciting because, that could be basically used to, that extra nitrogen could be used to then go on to hopefully grow more of the beans on the plant, or maybe somehow they could...
they even mentioned that if there's a higher yield producing plant, you might use that extra nitrogen that you're saving from all the soybeans to then help another produce or something that you want to use.
Right.
So it's basically they found a way to get free nitrogen by dialing back some of the chlorophyll that the soybeans didn't need. So whether to use the nitrogen in those soybeans directly and allow them to produce more, that's one of their goals. And then the other one is to then maybe apply the extra nitrogen to another crop that might benefit even more from it.
Right. Because,
either way, you're getting free nitrogen, and they're just trying to figure out a way to maximize how much food we're going to get from it.
Yeah. Because the way I interpret this is the nitrogen is in the soil.
Exactly.
Still, so the plant's not taking up the nitrogen because it doesn't need to now.
It doesn't need it, so it's there.
Right. So that's pretty exciting. Why is this so exciting in your eyes, Tom?
Yeah. So on trèSci, we've talked a few times about just the world population in general, and we were doing a little bit of research on our own before the show started, and there's a pretty cool website called worldmeters.info, and it has all kinds of different stats, and we looked up that the net amount of people born in 2018, so that's accounting for the amount of people who died, the net growth of people in 2018 is already 1.7 million people.
In 8 days.
In 8 days, we have a net increase of 1.7 million people.
Wow.
That's insane. Like we've mentioned before, every person who's born, you need to think about what it takes to feed this person.
Yeah.
And it's almost staggering that we can feed as many people as we do. Which brings up another point we were talking about, which is how are we feeding all these people? And when you look at the major crops, things like rice and soybeans, like we were just talking about, and corn, almost all of these top producers that feed basically the entire world have some sort of GMOs or have been modified genetically somehow to make them yield more, to get more food out of them.
Yeah.
So this is a really real issue where there's a lot of people attacking things like GMOs when they're really the only reason we're able to feed the entire planet the way we do.
Yeah,
obviously there's still issues, but it's, we're working on ways to somehow mitigate it.
Yeah. I mean, the world's food supply needs to be the most reliable thing, right? Like if we somehow don't, yield the necessary crops for what we all expect to be able to use as produce, then we're going to be in huge trouble, right?
Huge trouble, yeah.
There's already way too many people on planet Earth that are famished, right? That are starving.
And the only way we're feeding the people as we are is because of things like GMOs.
Yeah.
So it's also another staggering number when you look up the amount of people who are overweight and obese, and it's such a large number. And you just think about all the people in general and how much food they require. It's like, it's staggering to really think about all the numbers and how it all works out.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy to think, like you said, there's already almost 2 million more people
just in
to account for, right? Just in a week, in the past week. And somehow we're going to do it, right? Like,
we have to rise to the occasion, yeah.
I think a lot of this boils back down to, at least in the United States, the fact that we can do it somewhat effectively is that we undertake a every 10 years a pretty rigorous census, try and count all the people that are here. Which
it seems like that's going to be more and more important as time goes on.
Yeah, which is a little bit troublesome because we've mentioned, at least on one episode of trèSci in the past, that it doesn't seem like the Census Bureau is getting enough support for the 2020 census, which is coming, pretty fast. It's going to be in 2 years. And that could be really troublesome if we don't get accurate statistics for how the populations are growing in different regions of the country and how much food supply we need to be able to account for.
It's like a giant logistic problem.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how many component pieces there are and where they are and what you need to do,
you're bound to make mistakes.
It's bound to go awry.
Crazy. I forgot whose turn it is. I think it's your turn. Yeah, it is.
Moving on.
You started.
So next story, number 7. Life expectancy drops for the 3rd consecutive year in a row in the United States.
That's crazy.
So the last time that the life expectancy fell 2 years in a row was in 1962, 1963. So about 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And while mortality for heart disease and cancer are leveling off, the biggest spikes in death over the past years were drug-related, opioid-related overdoses. And those numbers are the highest that they've been, and they've been rising in recent years. And a lot of the statistics that we were reading, it seems that that spike in the opioid epidemic is killing a lot of younger people.
Mm.
So people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s dying a lot earlier than they would, and sort of skewing a lot of the data. While it might seem like things are, we're not doing the right thing health-wise, but we are sort of leveling off heart disease and cancer. We're doing a decent job, but that spike down drop happens to be from the epidemic of opioids. And I think it was right to call it an epidemic when you can see it stand out in the data like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where it's a spike and it actually drops down the life expectancy because of how young they were and how many people are dying from drug overdoses.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy to see it come up in the numbers like that.
Yeah. Now, I mean, to be clear, the life expectancy hasn't shot down many years.
It's literally like fractions of a year, from 78.9 to 78.6.
Yeah.
So a third of a year, we're talking a couple months.
Yeah. And if your lifestyle habits are good, then nothing really to worry about, right? Statistics are kind of just statistics.
Exactly. So that's why it's important to look at this statistic and not just say life expectancy is down, we're doing a crappy job.
Yeah.
We want to know why it is.
Right. But that is troubling to hear. We only want that number to ever go up.
Exactly.
So, pretty crazy stuff there.
Yeah, but it's definitely interesting to think about life expectancy from extremely early people till now, because it's gone so far up from what it was originally, right?
Yeah, people used to live
leaps
till
and bounds.
25, 26, and now we're quadruple that almost, which is.
Yeah,
that's good, but
yeah, I mean, shouldn't that always be the goal, to not only live as long as you can, but as well as you can at the same time?
True. Number 8, California might be in a little bit of some trouble with their weather forecast coming up. This comes by way of weather.us. They tweeted out, here's the Swiss Super HD model's rain forecast for Southern California through Tuesday. And then they go on to say the Thomas Fire burn scar could see as much as 6 inches of rain, which would be more than enough to result in significant mudslide and flash flood problems. So
there's a few different things going on here. It hasn't really rained in the state of California in quite a few months. They've had a lot of drought and obviously a lot of wildfires that we've been covering.
Right.
But now the whole state is forecasted to get rain. So what's the issue now? That the whole state's finally getting rain. They haven't had it. There's been tons of fires. Yeah. Does not seem like this is what they need. They need the rain. But they got drought, but yeah.
The problem is that when you have a burn scar like that it kind of acts almost like a hard shell or like a pavement layer. So the water can't
infiltrate and seep into the ground.
Yeah, and so it's just going to flow toward the path of least resistance and down toward the basins and the ocean eventually. And whatever, dirt and debris is in the way, it's just going to pick up and move along with it.
Drag it down.
So yeah, that's kind of terrible news for people that are maybe recovering from the wildfires and looking to get back to their properties and what's left of their homes and try to mitigate the damage.
Yeah, they might have to do some evacuation where the burn scars are from the fires.
Yeah, so that's not very nice news for them.
Yeah, because like you mentioned, the remains of the burn, the way it becomes compacted on the ground, it almost makes an impermeable layer like pavement, whereas when it lands, it just runs off. And the problem with that, when you get a lot of runoff, and then there's less trees and lots of vegetation in the way to suck that up too and get in the way, it's just, what comes down keeps going down.
Yeah.
And when it rains on dirt, it gets muddy. and there you go.
And when it rains, it pours, Thomas.
Yeah, we covered the Big Sur landslide. That one came down actually and came over an entire road, if you remember that.
Yeah.
That big one.
Was that you and me, or was that you and James? That talks about that. I remember
that was too long ago.
Yeah, I remember thinking about it, but
yeah. So California is a place that's prone to landslides and mudslides.
Yeah.
And here's another example of why they are so prone to them is because after these large burn events, you're going to get all kinds of things coming down the mudslide.
Yeah. All right.
Those videos are actually really crazy.
Oh yeah,
the mudslide videos, because it's all just brown, murky water, and then it's like, they're crazy.
Yeah.
Last story.
Hang in there. I think this is you.
Yes, sir. So 2017 was the third warmest year on record, according to NOAA. Talk about them a lot. So the average U.S. temperature in 2017 was 54.6 degrees. Fahrenheit. That is Fahrenheit, yes.
Not Celsius. That would be really hot.
Very true. And 2.6 degrees Fahrenheit above the average.
Okay.
And one of the other things to note, the 5 warmest years ever on record are all after the year 2006. So that's in the past 11, 12 years that we've had the 5 warmest years. So I think we're all aware at this point. We talk about the warming climate a lot, but we're just trying to keep the statistics in mind as we go into the future and just think about what the past year really was.
Yeah. I mean, looking at this map, it's pretty striking, right? Like it can range from blue to, kind of this deeper red, where blue is like a record coldest, and then shades of blue getting up to white would be colder than average. And I don't know about you, but I really don't see any blue on this map whatsoever. And in fact, almost the whole state of, I think that's Arizona, is in this record warmest color. That's pretty crazy. So, it's just been real hot.
Yeah, there was that crazy heat streak that we talked about for a little while.
Yeah.
And it was like melting people's mailboxes in Arizona and stuff.
That's right,
we talked about that.
Yeah, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Utah, it looks like. Real hot.
Yeah. So going on with the weather, we're talking about just the weather in general from the past year, and as well as being a very warm year, it was a super costly year. I feel like every trèSci episode we were talking about some sort of natural disaster.
Yeah.
Almost in every episode, whether it was Irma, whether it was Harvey, whether it was wildfires.
Yeah, it's been
there was
earthquakes,
story after story.
It just didn't stop. Yeah, that was really kind of the main focus, and of the year,
and the social media and news media in general were sort of trying to hop on board with that. I don't think I've ever seen more weather coverage than I had this past year. The Weather Channel was super all over it for every storm, as well as your major news networks were giving a lot of time to these storms. People were paying attention,
because
these were major landfall hurricanes and things that were impacting the U.S. that we haven't seen in a while.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a super anomalous year in regard to into hurricanes, but when they make landfall like that, that's when the story matters, right?
Definitely.
It doesn't matter if the Category 4 is in the Atlantic Ocean. No one's going to hear about it. We had so many major landfalls this year to go on with all the other weather disasters. It's quite a year.
Yeah, and it's scary, right? Like this is something that's just completely out of our control. You know, the weather is just going to happen regardless of what we want to happen. You know, we always want it to be sunny 70, right? Like that'd be awesome, but that's just not always the case, and we've gotten a lot of really devastating weather events over the course of 2017. I don't know. Do you want to give the dollar amount, Tom?
Yeah. So one point I wanted to make before giving out the dollar sign is that for whatever reason now, whenever there's a weather event, we have to talk about some way in some sort of climate change because either someone's denying it or someone's saying something ridiculous. But I just want to put in context the numbers. So in 2017, the estimated total of all the weather events was $306 billion.
Worth of damage.
Of damage.
Yeah.
Just in this past year alone. So when we're talking about things like the weather and the climate and where we're going in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and people are throwing these massive numbers at you, like this is how much we're going to have to spend. In 1 year, this just destroyed $306 billion worth of things in the United States. So when you think about, dealing with an issue in a manner of the way you have to, you got to take into account how much of an issue this actually is. When you say, oh, they're throwing $50 billion at this, oh my God, like that's so much money. But when you realize the impact, we had an active severe weather season. That's a lot of money, $306 billion.
Yeah, certainly. Now, I agree with you. I just want to get that off the bat. Of course, I look at something like launching a more sophisticated weather satellite as an investment that should be made, needs to be made. But I'm going to play devil's advocate with you here. Is that even if we spent all $306 billion
just trying to combat the weather,
right? Is there anything that we could have done to have stopped what actually transpired?
No, I don't think there's anything we could have done.
Probably not.
With all of those resources, because it's just 1 year. We can't change the weather that we've been getting forever. We've always had hurricanes and we've had forest fires. It was an insanely active year that cost a lot of money. So you can't just throw money at this problem. But when we're looking at society in general and the context of a warming climate and a warming planet, and we're trying to actually think about how much these issues are actually going to affect us, it's important to remember years like this and remember how much a single year can affect so many different places.
Yeah. And
then to monitor that in the future as we go on. And it looks like it could only get slightly worse with the warming of our planet.
Yeah.
But nothing in general, I think you could say was completely related to the warming climate. They're still trying to, put those sort of research together.
Yeah, and we'll get to that actually
in a little bit.
In just a bit. Cool. That's it for the lightning round. Let's check in with the chat, see what's going on over there.
My mom said, I don't know about wild birds, but chickens don't lay eggs their whole life.
That's because they get slaughtered and turned into chicken nuggets. No, that's sorry. That's a joke. I mean, they do, but that's that's another thing. Nancy Kalita says, "Wow, that's an incredible number."
I think she was referencing when we were talking about the population growth.
Oh, yeah. Well, that is an incredible number. Also,
a lot of people were born already.
Yeah. Kayla Riley says, "Less people." I agree. Just less people in general would be good. Yeah, and then Carrie Kalita says these data should be used to plan remedial action. So yeah, I mean that makes the most sense of where the best sort of use for spending the dollars that we have
to try and
on these problems, right?
So they don't happen again.
Right.
And then Karen said they get slaughtered because they stop
I
lying.
know. Okay. I'm totally just kidding.
She's getting on you.
I know.
You can't spew nonsense around here.
No way. Moving on to the Friday poll results.
The poll results.
The poll results. Remember, you can always vote on the Friday poll
on Facebook, Twitter,
really on any
Patreon,
of the social media sites. Patreon is actually, I found, the best for kind of putting up images and keeping an actual poll track going. Twitter is nice because they have the poll option, but no pictures I can associate with it. Facebook is useless and they don't really allow for a poll thing. I tried messing around actually, Kyle, with that widget or whatever it was. I wasn't having a whole lot of success with figuring that out. But you can always just leave comments, and I'll count that as the poll as I tally them up. Yeah. And or just text me, whatever.
Yeah, text them, put it on Facebook. Make sure you get us your answer, though. Yeah, this is important.
So this week's poll was blizzard versus record low temperatures. I wanted to kind of put a spin on kind of the weather events we were experiencing here in the Northeast.
What was impactful or stand out to you?
And the winner this week was blizzard. Blizzard was the overwhelming winner.
I actually voted for the frigid cold.
You did, huh?
Yeah, I did.
I voted blizzard.
It was pretty cold, dude.
Yeah, I know. Blizzard won 21-14 in the vote this week. So, basically 3 portions to 2, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of interesting because, a lot of people's reasoning, sometimes people give me their logic behind their vote, and a lot of people's reasoning was, at least with the blizzard, I get the chance of having a day off. Whereas if it's just cold out, you kind of don't, and that's fair, I guess.
Yeah. So the blizzard was Winter Storm Grayson.
Yep.
Almost every school had the 2 days off to make a 4-day weekend.
Yeah. I was off both days from work, which was nice, but then I had to go out and snowblow, which was not so nice. Yeah. But it wasn't that bad. But I was just out late because we couldn't, start until the blizzard was over, really.
Exactly.
So we were out late. Oh, dude. Did I even tell you? Yeah, I did tell you, but I want to talk about it on the show. So we're snowblowing this one woman's driveway, and my buddy Trevor that I do it with, he's leading because he's got the better snowblower, so I'm kind of behind him. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden he like stops dead in front of me, and he's waving his arms. He's like, "Dude, come here." So I go over to him, and I'm like, "What's up?" He's like, "I thought there was ice in getting caught in the auger blades." Mm-hmm. It was birds. They were like these 2 like completely frozen solid ducks.
Just
totally frozen solid in the snow. And he accidentally hit him. And at first I was like mortified.
It made like a crunching noise, right?
Yeah. I was mortified because I was like, oh my God.
We killed these birds.
These birds. That's awful. But obviously
they were frozen already.
Yeah, they had died before then. But that's just how intense this storm and this weather, I guess, has been.
I had made the joke like they should have migrated,
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. It was really that cold.
Yeah. I was floored.
That's some day after tomorrow stuff.
Seriously.
The birds froze on the driveways.
Yeah.
So crazy.
I've never seen anything like that before, so I was a little taken aback. But
that actually reminds me, in Florida, they actually, from Winter Storm Grayson, they got a tiny bit of snow and some freezing temperatures. And what would happen to the iguanas, because they're cold-blooded, they would freeze in the tree. They would fall flat down from the tree, frozen. And then if you put them in the sun, they would actually come back to life.
Oh,
so they're telling people to lay them in the sun because that's how cold it was. Wild
that is crazy. But that makes sense because iguanas aren't used to that kind of stuff. Yeah. These look
birds.
They look like Canadian geese.
They had plenty of feathers.
Yeah. What are you doing?
So Winter Storm Grayson. So what made it so impactful as it came up the East Coast was what almost all the news sources were calling bombogenesis, which we had mentioned before on trèSci.
A couple times we've talked about it. Yeah.
And as its pressure dropped, it became similar in size and strength with wind speed and pressures similar to Superstorm Sandy. And there was a lot of coastal flooding associated with Winter Storm Grayson as well because of the super blue moon. So you had the tide coming in along with the pressure and the storm surge. So there was flooding on some streets, and I saw videos with ice sheets floating on the water. It literally looked like a scene from the Titanic. And then you see street signs in people's houses.
Yeah.
Pretty wild stuff with
nuts.
flooding to go along with the storm.
Yeah.
So going back to bombogenesis, why did everybody use this term? And it was thrown all over the place when you usually don't see it in the mainstream media.
Yeah. Bomb cyclone.
Bomb cyclone.
People are abbreviating it to bomb cyclone because bombogenesis
is too much.
Too jargony.
So this particular storm, bombogenesis, is a term used to describe a low pressure system that drops at least 24 millibars in 24 hours. And this particular one dropped 59 millibars in 24 hours. So it was way above that. And it was just a massive strengthening of a storm and a super decrease of the pressure. I'm trying to say that right. The pressure dropped a lot, and it did that because it was fed in sort of from this other drier, colder air coming in from the top as well as from the bottom. It sort of came in around like a big curve. Do we have a picture of that? I think we might.
Do we have a picture of that?
I thought we did.
Somewhere in here.
Somewhere.
We have the airflow picture.
Okay, I'll go to that one in a little bit.
Okay.
So, real quick, sorry about that, Kyle. When we're talking about bombogenesis here, it's something that particularly happens the most by the Aleutian Islands in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually one happening there right now. Just sort of the way the low gets fed into by the other parts of the upper atmosphere. It was just something that when you have low pressure, you have rising air, and then it just allowed in the upper atmosphere that air to disperse a lot and just really just increase the whole system of rising air. And it really just fed it into a bigger and bigger low pressure system. You see it on radar, it looks like a hurricane basically.
Yeah.
It really did look like a spinning hurricane. And when you got some of your heaviest snow in the bands, you got it around, I think around here it was like 1 o'clock-ish. And then you would get it again at like 8 as the band rotated back around, which you usually don't get in a snowstorm. And obviously we had the massive winds from the strengthening of the low pressure system.
Yeah.
So quite the storm. And that's why everybody was talking about the bombogenesis, because Florida got a little bit of snow and then this thing over a day and a half just became a monster of a storm.
Yeah.
That it wasn't before. So they kind of wanted to do it justice to tell you how it happened.
Yeah.
All right. So that's bombogenesis.
Yeah, it blew up in the mainstream media though.
It did, yeah.
No pun intended.
It blew up.
Yeah. And real quick, I want to give a shout out. Scott in the chat says reports of frozen sharks near Cape Cod. Ooh. I saw that also. Nick was telling me about that. He was messaging me on the trèSci Instagram, and I was like, that's insane. Seriously insane. Sharks just freezing in the ocean. It's too cold.
Yeah.
But moving forward, I wanted to also sort of bring in the record low temperature aspect of the Friday poll that we were talking about, because this is one of the coldest first weeks of the year ever
that we've recorded in the United States.
Yeah, in the Northeast. So I thought we could talk a little bit more about that in the Tom's Corner for this week to close out the show, and sort of tie it back into this climate weather sort of debate that's been raging on at the tail end of this year.
Yeah. So the way I like to explain it with these cold temperatures is, near the North Pole up there, there's just cold air in the winter. There's not a lot of sun. It gets extremely cold up there.
Yeah. And
when you get a trough of high pressure near Alaska, that's sort of pushing up the trough there, and then you're going to get a big dip down that's going to allow that cold air to come in. So we had a high pressure in Siberia and Russia and one on Alaska, and we had this big deep trough that cut down. So if we could put up...
Yes, so we'll have the first image, if we could, Kyle, of from the Tom's Corner section here.
So when we see this picture, the blue is all the cold. All those lines are just the air and the wind, I mean. And when the lines are closer together, you get more wind. And you can see in this picture, we have tons of wind up there on the Northeast.
Mm-hmm.
But
And that's from the storm, right?
I think that one was from the storm when this was taken.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah. So what you get is that just the conditions right for the jet stream to dip down, but this is the second time that it's done it in recent times, because we were just talking about snow in Georgia
right
a little while ago, and now we had snow in Florida again. There was snow in Texas we talked about. So this is a huge dip down in the jet stream. Is there a name for this weather pattern, Carrie asked. So for this one in particular, they just sort of mention it like an Arctic blast. They call it things like that. All it really is a dipping down of the jet stream, because you have a big, nice high pressure underneath Alaska pushing that part of the jet stream up. You get a big dip down.
Right, because the air just can't really go anywhere else, right?
It has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So
the thing with this, right?
I just want to bring it back to another term that we might have heard, the polar vortex that we talked a lot about last year on the news. I don't know if you remember them saying the polar vortex.
Yeah.
So that's just the ring of air near the North Pole, that fast circulating air that's kind of like a jet stream. And I read a few blogs where they were saying that it might have been from a slight weakening in the polar vortex due to sea ice melt, but they can't correlate it yet. But that's their goal with doing climate and weather research, is they want to know how the warming and the melting affect things like the polar vortex and affect how far that jet stream is going to drop down. Because like we saw, if you get the right conditions for it to happen, we had massive cold all the way down to Florida and then in the Northeast for a long time. So they're basically trying to correlate, does something like this depend on things like the polar vortex and the extent of sea ice for the jet streams and the polar vortex to work the way they do? And could they change depending on the temperatures?
Right.
So I just want to bring that up as things that they're looking for, because we just saw an example of when it does sort of weaken the polar vortex a little bit and you get a big dip down, it's a major impact on our country.
But it's important to note, right, Tom, that we don't have enough evidence yet to really say
the warming climate is causing anything like
right.
this. Yeah, we can't correlate that at all. Yeah.
Right. And so whenever weird weather events happen, it feels like in the mainstream
media, you just want to say it. It's crazy. It's got to be climate change.
Right? It's got to be climate change.
Because everyone's yelling about
climate
it.
Change.
It can't be, yeah.
So, we saw this with the major hurricanes. We saw this. People were trying to do it with the earthquake.
Yeah.
I was like, what are you talking about? But it's important to keep that in your mind, because we saw sort of a back and forth happen right around New Year's. And it started, of course, with President Trump tweeting out. And Kyle, if you don't mind bringing up the tweet here, I'll see if I can find it too. He tweeted out, this was on December 28th, so this is going back right before the New Year. He said, in the East, it could be the coldest New Year's Eve on record. Perhaps we could use a little bit of that good old global warming that our country, but not most other countries, was going to pay trillions of dollars to protect against. Bundle up. And of course, this set off
all kinds of different people.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't look at Twitter. Our Twitters are filled with meteorological and atmospheric science tweets, people going off about it. So everybody was ready to combat this because
it's nonsense. Yeah.
It's just either the way I kind of wrote it here in the notes, it's either just complete negligence of the difference between weather and climate systems, or just a huge troll, right? Like, this is just being put out there, right, to stir up the pot. So, I mean, either way, it doesn't matter, because President Trump's not a climate scientist. He's not,
and it is nonsense.
Yeah, and he's not the authority on these things anyway. So it doesn't even matter what he has to say about them.
But one of the interesting things was a lot of people were putting up a graphic in response to him of a weather temperature map. Do we have that one?
We do. This will be the last picture to go up, Kyle. Thank you so much.
So after Trump made his dumb tweet, a lot of people came back and were like, look at this picture. Look, it's cold in the U.S., but it's warmer everywhere else. So on average, it's got to be, we're still warming.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. There are a lot of the professional meteorologists and things that we follow said, this is dumb, a disservice to all the science that we're doing. This is one day. This is not a map of the last 100 years.
Yeah.
This is a temperature map of one day.
Right.
If you're trying to say anything about the climate or the trends of the Earth from what the temperature is one day on the planet, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Throwing this temperature map back there by saying, "Oh, it's still warmer in these places on this day," that's not even the correct science either.
This is
but they're trying to combat a dumb tweet with just some sort of evidence to invalidate it.
Right.
But when you look at just temperatures for one day, you're not going to learn anything about the climate.
Yeah. So, right. And this temperature anomaly map for January 1st, 2018, you see lots of blue and purple over the eastern side of the United States.
It's cold there.
Indicating that it's cold. You see a large part of the rest of the map is very strikingly red, which indicates it's warmer than average. But again, right, this is just one snapshot, one day in the history of...
Even if you want to try and back it up with a claim, this isn't the graphic.
This isn't the one to use, right? Rather use, now we can because it's just posted today, but we can use NOAA's vast amount of research indicating that 2017 was the third warmest year on record.
Yeah, you don't just need to throw up a picture of one day.
Yeah.
We have the numbers for the whole year. And overall, it was still warmer, and it is still warming.
Yeah.
So, I didn't really want to even bring up climate change in regard to all this amazing weather events, because it's just awesome to talk about the weather, and it's complicated enough on its own. But, Trump made me do it.
Yeah.
Made me talk about climate change.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? Is
we don't need to be talking about it all the time.
Yeah, and
we know what it is and what it's doing.
And when the leader of our country just insists on talking about it in the context of whether it's real or not,
it just sort of invalidates the whole thing.
And
it's frustrating.
You have to address it.
Yeah. You can't just let it go by the wayside.
Yeah. Anywho.
We're about over our time today.
Yeah.
We're getting fired up.
I know. We've forgotten how to do this, so we've gone a little bit over. But that's okay, because this was a good show back. It's a nice warm welcome by our lovely chat here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, guys.
Yep, we want to say thanks to you guys again for sticking with us throughout the last year and for continuing to watch going into the future. And
heck yeah, thanks for all the support, guys.
Yeah.
Anybody who watches or helps us out, really appreciate it.
Yeah. And of course, we'll see you all next week on episode 4.
Yeah,